on average, a person touches their phone 2,016 times a day.
Stop.
Touches
2,000?
it. Touches
Yeah,
it.
maybe.
96 times a day on average, they open it and actually do something with it. 96 times. So, and then for every time, so there was a study done by a university out of California, and they said that every time you get distracted, it takes an average of 23 minutes for your brain to get back to the place that it was in full focus. And in those 23 minutes is as if the equivalent of having drank a beer or had 4 hours sleep. So what are we doing that we're perpetually in reaction mode? We're operating at a lower brain capacity. It's like crazy
100%.
what we're doing to ourselves.
Welcome, everyone, to the Jake Dunlap Show. This is your weekly dose of real success stories from entrepreneurs, athletes, celebrities, CEOs, and the people that you love. If you've ever wondered what makes people tick, what are the weird things that happened to them in their past that help to shape the people that they've became, every Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern, you can tune in and get exactly that. The behind the scenes, not the typical behind the scenes, but the real stories that shaped some of the people that you know, love, and follow. All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. Today's guest, this is a fun one for me because obviously a lot of you know I run a sales consulting firm, and so sometimes with different guests I get to chop it up on marketing and sales, and other times we're talking about the journey as primarily. So today we get to do a little bit of both, and today's guest has quite the journey, and I'm excited to share parts of it. When her father, who was literally one of America's top marketing executives, trainers, strategic consultants, suddenly passed away, his business empire with hundreds of staff and clients rested on the shoulders of this guest. Nobody thought that a free-spirited artist who is a gifted singer and a USC graduate with a Bachelor of Science in Music industry would be into carrying on this incredibly huge legacy. But she managed to prove that she was born to lead. And it was exactly her artistic nature and forward-thinking ideas, combined with her father's proven process and marketing methodology, that helped her continue his mission of teaching others to radically change their lives and find their footing in the ruthless world of business. 10 years after her father's ultimate passing, today's guest released a revised edition of his book. Many of you will kind of guess who I'm talking about now. It's called The Ultimate Sales Machine, which she also included a new strategy to generate income that her father discovered while sharing in an email to an old friend. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ms. Amanda Holmes.
Oh, so happy to be here, Jake.
There we go. This is going to be a fun one. I'm excited about this because, again, like your background's fun. We're definitely going to get into, and don't worry, we will try to scour YouTube for clips of the Amanda Holmes Band, which I'll get to that later for those folks who are interested. So let's dive into it. So born in Northern California, let's talk a little bit about, what it was like growing up, with an entrepreneur, a public figure as a, father, and, what are some of the big lessons that you kind of look back at today, whether it was, moments in time growing up, things that were instilled to you that, maybe as life progressed, you really realized came from, growing up in this environment?
It's interesting because my father believed that he sacrificed his life to give me and my brother the opportunity to do whatever we wanted. He wanted to support our wildest dream. He used to joke about, if you want to be like somebody that takes out the trash, I wish that for you, and I want you to be the best at it in the entire world. So whatever you want to do, I will support it. And so when I decided to become a singer, he was fully behind me and there to support. So the traditional, like, oh, I'll take my son or my daughter under my wing and teach them the ropes and get them around the business. I didn't have that so much. I heard it when we'd eat dinner with clients, and every time my father would talk to somebody that owned a business, he'd always be giving them strategies. So I did get to hear it that way.
Right.
But I was a gymnast. I was a dancer. I was a singer. I mean, the first time I did a lemonade stand, I wrote lemonade 99 cents. And my father came over and said, no. This isn't how you do this. You say best lemonade in the world, 99 cents. So, he course corrected me there, but I still had a lot of other things that I really was involved in that
Yeah.
weren't so much. So I look back and think, wow, it would have meant so much to me to involve me in the world of business. Like my head of sales, Troy Aberley, he brings along his 14-year-old and his 11-year-old to a bunch of our trainings, and I look at how they're learning at such a young age, and I think, holy cow, we really need to do that. That's really wonderful to give them the knowledge or the business acumen at a young age.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's kind of that mix of both. I'm a father of an 8 and a 4-year-old. And so I think about this a lot as well, too, that my son, sometimes what he'll pick up is just me cursing because I owe him $1 for every time. And he keeps very fastidious records of these dollars that I owe him when I'm doing it. And I think it's that mix, right, of, letting you go and explore that, and then also, bringing along and sharing that expertise that, someone who's such a deep domain expert, gets an opportunity to travel, really can provide. And I think a lot of people, they go too hard one way or the other. It can be too hard, like, oh, I want this person to be like me, or I want this person to like go be their own things. And it sounds like your dad was kind of like facilitating you to go do other things, but still there was some like osmosis, going on from time to time.
That is a good, I agree with what you're saying, because I was very resistant to being a part of what he was doing. So then him supporting me in my music was actually very helpful. So you do make a good point.
Yeah. And I think it's that, like, it's like, how do you balance it? I don't know. Look, I'm not a parenting expert. Let's put it that way. I'm still trying to figure it out like everyone else. So then you go to USC to pursue music. I know that you recorded 4 albums. We're really going down that path. Where did that come from? Where was like the passion for kind of music? And you mentioned gymnastics and these kind of like arts. Where do you feel like that passion came from? And what was it that you kind of decided that you're like, hey, at that time, this is what I want my path to be?
Well, my father so he was so incredibly prolific. He wrote thousands upon thousands of campaigns for the biggest of companies, all the way. I mean, he worked with 60 of the Fortune 500 down to, we've assisted 250,000 businesses worldwide at this point. So he was a part of so much of that. And then at home, you'd think that he'd be recharging and just be drained of energy. But what grew his energy was creating. So then he'd come home and he'd write hundreds of songs, and he wrote screenplays, and he sold them to Warner Brothers. And so he lived and breathed this idea that whatever you want to be, you can be. Just go and do it. All it takes is a little thing that we call pig-headed discipline and determination. My father invented that phrase. So when I decided, okay, music is what I'm going to do, I just was pig-headed and focused. And when everyone else released 1 record in 4 years, I did 4. And that definitely helped my chops for the bridging that gap, right? Like playing on the streets and trying to make my tours be profitable. Yeah. And I was the only profitable musician I knew. So
he was like actually making somewhat of a living. Yeah, so let's talk about that, because we were talking about in that kind of pre-show, like your hustle as a musician. Like you go to like your random coffee shop or to go hear a band, and they're like, hey, if you want to buy the CD, our CDs are here. Hopefully you like the music. But that wasn't your path. So talk a little bit about like, how did you become like one of the only profitable musicians that you knew?
Well, I think it's funny. So it's like any business owner out there. They put out a product and they think, as soon as I've put out a product, then people will swarm and
flock sell itself.
And buy it. Yeah,
so easy.
They'll fly off the chart. Yeah. Well, so it's the same thing with musicians, maybe even worse, because they're so artistic in their mind that they just think, I'll have this here and everybody will come and want to buy it. I, however, wasn't going to wait to have to hear if people were going to want to buy it or not. So in between every song, I found some clever, creative way to mention my tip jar, to mention my CDs. I made sure that every single person, if I was playing in a coffee shop, I was talking to every single person in the room. I knew their names. I'd say, if you'd like to commemorate this experience that we've had
Ooh,
together over the last
commemorate.
30 minutes, I don't know why you wouldn't pick up this $5 CD, right? Like I would just continue. And then once, majority of the time, 100% of the people would purchase. That was a no-brainer.
Well,
And
because
then I
you're
started
commemorating an experience. You're not really
of
buying a
course.
CD. This is like commemoration.
And the song about my tip jar and how I'm a college student and, I'm struggling. And I would have dialogues with the tip jar about, do you feel like they like you? Because I don't feel like they're really giving you much love. Are you giving my tip jar love? It was part of a bit. It was
I
hilarious.
love it.
But I even went as far as when I was trying to figure out how to upsell, because since I sold all my CDs, then what do I do next? So one night I got the idea that I told the audience, if you can fill my tip jar, I will walk across the stage on my hands. And I'm telling you, people from the audience grabbed my tip jar and ran around the room trying to get it to fill. And they did fill it. So I walked on my hands across the stage, which I thought was hilarious. And then I recreated it online on Periscope. I got 100,000 likes in like 3 weeks. And then I walked on my hands and like, you guys can just Google this. I don't know why this matters.
Shout out to
But
Periscope.
just entertainment, right? Entertainment was fun.
Yeah, you're at the beginning, like the mix, right? Of like, it's a mix of like amazing performance plus entertainment. You got to have a little bit of both today. And
I think that was the only skill that really helped me transition over into the business, because then I started selling on webinars. And to me, it was easy to educate and entertain because I had done it in the music career.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that it's a skill. I think for a lot of people, it can just feel uncomfortable, or maybe, and maybe this is kind of, we talked about this kind of from a musician, like less pure. It's like, which is kind of silly to think about, but like to your point of thinking that, oh, well, if I just do this pure art, or if the information is just so good, then people will, flock to it, as opposed to like, well, no, you've got to package it in a way that people want to consume it and are excited to consume it. And I think a lot of people, struggle with that. That kind of balance between giving value and also, being able to, make a pitch in a way that's entertaining and, easy for someone to say, oh, like, yeah, I can resonate with that. Yeah, I'll take action. And so let's talk about the move, right? So, I want to hear just a little bit about like, obviously your father passes away at some point, and what was that internal dialogue for you? You have this path you're kind of going down. Your dad has obviously built this kind of like, larger than life business and, Rolodex and experience for himself, and you're going left. Secretly though, you've learned a lot of these skills that have kind of carried with you throughout your life. What was that conversation like with yourself to say, you know what, I'm going to go take this thing over and obviously have a lot of success doing it?
Yeah. So I want to also say, so my father battled cancer for 1.5 years before he passed. And in all of that, he spent 382 nights in the hospital, never once a night alone. So it was between me, my brother, and my mom, rotating. And in all those nights, sleepless nights, because he got night sweats, so we'd be up all night with him. And never once did he say, like, these are my companies, Amanda. This is who runs my companies. This is what I'd like to see from my companies. Like, I got none of that. We just sat and chatted about, I'm grateful that I got that time as like a father and a friend, but it was not in any way preparing me for what was to come. And we had the time. That's what was weird. So when my father passed, I looked at this and went, my father passed at 55. He buried himself in an early grave with the amount of stress and pressure that he put on himself. So why would I, somebody that works very similar to him, I operate in a very similar way, and why would I, it's as if I'm burying myself in an early grave right next to him, stepping into his business. So that's what was going through my head. And I thought, no, I'm not stepping into this. So for 2 years, I hired and fired different C-suites, trying to fill the void, CMO, CTO, CEO, anything that I could do just so I could stay away. the furthest from the idea that I would come in and step in.
Yeah.
I do study I have a spiritual teacher, Guruji. She's the founder of Divine Bliss International. It's a nonprofit. And she told me, she was the one that was like, you can step in as CEO. And I looked at her like, what? You have got to be kidding me. She's like, no, you'll be able to step in as CEO. Never in a million years. But eventually she was right. And I stepped in as CEO. It's been 8 years now. So the first year I increased our leads by 1,176% and doubled our coaching clients multiple years in a row. And this year we're up 400% from last year. And, it's good stuff.
Yeah, just some like small growth there, taking it over. Like, well, I guess like what was, like what did she say to you? Or like what was the thing? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people even listening that, whether it's, maybe not inheriting a business that's that established, or maybe it's like wanting to go do their own thing, or, take something that's a side project or hustle and do it larger. Like, what do you feel like it was, whether it's like, kind of enabling you to kind of work through it yourself, or, what was that moment like where you're like, all right, I can do this?
She told me this story, which I think is a great analogy. And because I was afraid that, I'd bury myself in an early grave. And she said, you can take it over. You can just do it in a different way. Your father has sacrificed his entire life to build something that is actually wonderful. And you can carry it forward, but you have to do it in your own sense. So she gave me this idea, this picture of like, so you're going to go and you want to win a sale. But let's say it's a fruit from a tree. So you go up and you use an axe and you axe down the tree just to grab a piece of fruit. Whereas you could also go up to the tree, look at the fruit, be amazed by its wonder, look at its beauty, be thankful to the tree, and then lovingly pluck the apple. So you could have that fruit in either anger, pressure, force, manipulation, or you can get that fruit in love and gratitude and humility. And those two fruit will be the same. It's just the way in which you do it. And one will be the sweetest apple you've ever had, whereas the other will steal the sweetness because the pressure steals the pleasure from life. So when she said that to me and continued with this methodology of, it's the intention in which you go with everything you do, it changed my mind over time.
That's a great story. I think a lot of people could hear that and, think about, again, things that they're chasing and, is there a different way? And let's talk about those first few years. Again, you talked about, 1,000% plus growth. Like, what do you feel like you brought to the company, in those first few years? Is again, like, you don't have this massive business background or like marketing guru or sales background. I think again, like because of your experience, there's a lot of intuition and things that, like I said, maybe through osmosis that probably sunk in over the years. But, what are some big memories you have from those first few years? And why do you think that you're able to have, such, success early on?
Yeah. So when I inherited it, we were right at the precipice of my whole industry had gone online. It was right around 2013, 2014. And we'd still never processed an order online. And leads were drying up to our call center because it was all through the radio. And they had just passed the law that you could no longer pick up your phone and call in from a radio ad. And everybody in the organization could run the organization, but they didn't. My father was the innovator. My father was the voice on the radio. So 6 months afterwards, we're getting people crying, calling in, being like, he died. Why is his voice still your radio ad? Because nobody could write a radio ad from the team. Right. It was crazy. So I decided to go online, and I used the skill set that I felt most natural with, which is speaking to many. I've always felt very comfortable in front of a crowd. That's my happy place versus a lot of people don't like that, but I love it. Yeah. I thrive in that environment. So I took the presentation that he was doing one-to-one, or that the sales team was doing one-to-one, and I started running webinars where it would be 400 CEOs on a call, 300 CEOs on a call. And I'm 26 at this point.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And part of me is like, what am I doing? And everybody that's there is in their 50s and their 60s, because we assist businesses that are more established to get from $1 million to 5, from 5 million to 10, from 10 to 100 million and beyond. So it's not like they don't know anything, right? They're actually skilled at what they do.
Yeah, exactly.
But I thought My father gave me the skills. He gave me the script. I'm sorry, not the skills. He gave me the script. I'm a good presenter. We hire salespeople all the time to do this script. I just have to do the script in a webinar. And then instead of sending it to the so many sales, I just send it directly to a landing page. Let me learn this whole landing page and automation series.
Right.
And yeah, that assisted quite immensely.
I can imagine. Yeah. And it's like probably like right at the perfect time to where it's like, had you not done that quickly, there's a lot of other people kind of coming in, and it can be a very fragmented space, of people coming in with certain expertise here or there. And for you to figure that out relatively quickly, where, nowadays I think it's the idea of landing pages and webinars, like that's kind of that's like, I feel like that playbook also is like, there's a new playbook. But you were running that, 9+ years ago. And so how did you then like take some of the strategies? We're talking about like, some of the clients that you all have had that you've worked with multiple times that have built big businesses. Like what were some of like your learnings of then kind of new offerings, or like where the market was headed, and we'll call it like that mid to late, 2010s?
Oh man. So can I teach a strategy and then talk about how I innovated it? Is that okay?
Oh, you don't have to ask permission. I mean, you can dive right in.
Okay, so my father invented this concept called the Dream 100. It is the fastest, least expensive way to double sales. This one strategy has doubled the sales of more companies than any other. And he learned it doubling the sales for a billionaire by the name of Charlie Munger. Are you familiar with Charlie Munger?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, for those that don't know, So my father was able to double Charlie's sales at all 9 companies within 12 to 15 months, and several of them multiple years consecutively. So he realized that he had this system for doubling sales. And this particular concept is very simple in theory. So there's always a smaller number of better buyers than there are all buyers. That means that marketing and selling to them is cheaper than marketing and selling to all buyers. So he was given a list of 2,200 leads by Charlie, and Charlie said, okay, go cold call these 2,200. He looked at that and went, that's a lot of cold calls.
Yeah.
So he did a little bit more research, and he realized that 95% of the marketplace was purchased by only 167 of those. So that's where he started his first Dream 100 effort, a Dream 167. That's where the name was invented. So he led every single week. He would lead with, at that time, the mediums were much different than today. So he'd lead with a direct mail piece that was educational, that was clever, that was fun. Maybe it'd be a Rubik's Cube, can't quite figure out your lead generation system, or you're not closing enough sales and there's like a vice in there. All these funny little things that just catch the attention, right? And then the next week is a cold call. Hey, I'd love to educate you on blank, 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 blank. Everything led with something clever or educational or helpful week after week after week, until finally they would call and say, okay, I got to know what you do because this is so fascinating. And it took that single most important thing you need to succeed in business, which is pig-headed discipline and determination. So he did this for the first 5 months. He got not one sale. In the 6th month, he closed the largest contract that the industry had ever seen, and then doubled sales multiple years after that. So when I looked at that system, I said, okay, how can I adapt that to where I'm at right now? And what I found from our clients over the years, the more that I ask questions, the more I realize that a lot of the time people get overwhelmed by the idea of 100. My father had a great marketing staff and tons of sales reps to deploy this multi-channel, brilliant strategy. But a lot of people, you could just have 5. You could just have 20. So I call it now the target 20, or the target 12, sorry. So when I first took over the business to try and figure out how to establish myself in the space and say, we're here to stay, I went after all of the biggest names in my industry that all served the clientele that I serve. And I asked them all if they'd like to be a part of the biggest virtual event that entrepreneurs will see this year. We'll reach over 1 million people. And here's some of the names I'm talking to. I named dropped before I had anybody. I said it was the biggest thing and nothing had happened yet.
Right. Well, it will be. Like, you'll get there.
I faked it. But I ended up getting 12 of the biggest in the industry. I generated 30,000 leads in in 30 days without spending a dime for those 30,000 leads. And the average person that came to my virtual events spent 4 hours and 32 minutes with us. And these are CEOs and executives, right? Spending 4 hours with me. So to me, that speaks to, 30 years ago, 100 was a lot. Today, you can even hyper focus because we have the ability to see on the internet who truly is a better buyer for us. And my father always talked about, I got 60 of the Fortune 500 as clients. So my first thought was, I need to go after the biggest and the best. That is my ideal. So then I brought in our first Fortune 500 since my father passed. We started working with Panasonic. And then I started realizing bigger isn't always better. We have to truly define who is a dream client. So then one of our clients came up with this checklist, Carolyn Soldo, and I loved it. So I've continued it on. So when looking for your best of buyers, those that buy the most from you the most often, you want to make sure that they obviously generate a good amount of revenue. You want to make sure that they're profitable, because just because they're generating lots of revenue, if they're taking so much additional resources that they're not profitable, that's not a dream client. You want to make sure that it's easy to sell. So for me, trying to get into a Fortune 500 company, when I'm getting through procurement, it took so long. Wow, I think I'm actually better working with a $20 to a $75 million company because I don't have to go through procurement, right? Fourth, when they actually get your service or your product, do they enjoy it? Does it actually give them the best results? Because those will continue to bear fruit, right? So you don't want somebody that's not the right fit. And then lastly, you want to have fun with them. Why not pick people that you have fun with? And it's so much easier today to be able to express your own core values and what you look for in life. So why not find clients that are similar to that? So that's my 5-point checklist for how to truly determine your dream clients.
I love it. I'm taking my notes down here too.
Than ever before.
I love it. I took my little notes down. We'll link to some of this in the show notes too. So all of you out there, you can also rewind and listen to 2X, but I'll go ahead and put some of this in the show notes. So, okay. So it sounds like, again, like what you're able to do is kind of look at these things that were successful. And I think that's a lot, right? A lot of like what's old is new, just in different forms, and say, okay, well, in this new world, how has that evolved? How has it changed? And obviously, it's been very, very successful. So as you've continued to grow and scale, and as we, kind of transition, maybe talking about sales and entrepreneurship and, how some of these things have evolved. I know one of the things that you've been talking a lot about is time management. And with the pandemic in particular, maybe you'll appreciate this. This is the first time I've ever tried this. So I've got a sales leader, and we had a conversation around time management and blocking. And I said, okay, and I've done this before with other leaders on my team. You cannot say yes to another meeting this week. You cannot, no matter what it is. You have to practice the art of no. No, not right now, but I could do it later. And I feel like in this world right now, we've got so much information coming at us. People feel, I think we're looking for a little bit more of like a human interaction. So sometimes I think we maybe gravitate toward a more formal meeting, et cetera. But I've just found that, people struggle with time management right now. They struggle to say, no, not right now. They struggle to own. And I tell you, own your time. It's your calendar. The calendar says your name. You can do whatever you want with it, and I just see this kind of habit or this issue over the last, it's been an issue, but I feel like over the last few years, it's really exacerbated, where people are really struggling to control their time and to really focus on what matters most versus all these little micro Slack, Teams, email, text distractions. And that sometimes this kind of extreme of practicing saying no, I found to be kind of, at least for me and my organization, one of the more valuable time management tools that I can teach them, because I do see this as really one of the biggest issues in business right now is, and it sounds so boring to say time management, but look, I want to hear your take on this as well too. That's my quick trick that I've been doing.
I love that so much. I hope you create that into micro content, because I would love to hear that. I think that's freaking great.
Love it.
So I will add to what you were saying, and I agree with it. I always have a ton of market data. So on average, a person touches their phone 2,016 times a day.
Stop.
Touches
2,000?
Touches it. 96 times a day on average, they open it and actually do something with it. 96 times. So, and then for every time, so there was a study done by a university out of California, and they said that every time you get distracted, it takes an average of 23 minutes for your brain to get back to the place that it was in full focus. And in those 23 minutes is as if the equivalent of having drank a beer or had 4 hours sleep. So what are we doing that we're perpetually in reaction mode? We're operating at a lower brain capacity. It's like crazy what we're
100%.
doing to ourselves. So I agree. And we actually have tips. We actually have a 5-step process to increase your productivity by 500%. And my father went through this because he was working for Charlie Munger, a billionaire, and he realized Charlie's got the same 24 hours in a day as me. How come he's a billionaire and I am nothing near that? At that time, he was just starting off, right? So he crafted these 5 steps. Can I give them to you?
Of course.
Okay, awesome. So the first is touch it once, because on average, we look at information, we'll open an email and we'll reread it so many times. It's the equivalent of a week's vacation over a year. So
a week's vacation, rereading the same email and doing nothing with it.
Yeah, yes.
I could not agree more. There's an app. I don't know. Are you familiar with Superhuman?
No.
Oh my gosh. I would guess it makes me 20 to 30% more effective on email. Just to shout out to them. It's all based on keyboard shortcuts. And so because of that, like it's very quick and easy to like snooze things, move them to where it's like, I'm going to act on that once later and I can only snooze once. That's it. And so I feel like so many people, then I look at my wives and I'm like, oh my God, how do you operate? My wife, I think my wife is spending 2 weeks of vacation a year rereading emails. I'm just like, there's no system. It drives me crazy. So anyway, back to this. So the email, the rereading, that's a big one. And that makes a ton of sense.
Touch it. When you touch it, take action on it. So whether it's, hey, this is too long of an email, let's discuss it in our weekly call, or I need more time to think about this, or you're putting it into another folder that you will take action on it when it's in that folder. Number 2, you want to list off your top 6 most important things you need to do that day. Not 20, not 30, because people will just sit there and the dopamine hit of checking off another thing from their list. But then they don't get done what actually needs to get done. So top 6 only. And then the third step is allocating how much time it takes to do each one of those 6. The fourth thing is then actually putting it into your schedule. So from 8 to 8:30, I'm going to send out that client contract. From 8:30 to, you were saying blocking, right? What's amazing about this process is that so many people are in reactive mode all day long. My father called it got a minute meeting. You ever heard somebody say, hey, got a minute?
Oh my God. That is my favorite part about not working in an office is every time you finally finish a call, hey Jake, got a minute? Got a minute? You got a minute? It's like, no, I don't, but come on in.
Well, so what we recommend is instead of, hey, got a minute meetings, any big emergency or something that needs to be discussed, I don't have a time now, but I do have time between 11:30 to 12:30, and I've allocated that reactive time. So I'm being proactive about the reactive tasks.
Exactly.
And in that time, I'm also checking my email. Today, you may be checking social media, right? There's so many different places where we're operating. So planning your reactive time. And then when you're allocating where it should go in your calendar, number 5 is making sure that you're actually prioritizing what's important, because so often I'll fill out my calendar and then I'll realize the 2 most important things that need to get done haven't fit in my day's schedule. So then I have to rearrange. So the next one is prioritize. So you make sure that the most important things are in there. And then at the end of your day, so you take those just 15 minutes at the beginning of the day, but then it takes pig-headed discipline and determination to stick to it for the whole rest of the day. But you'll find that you know what you want to cover, and you've covered it and you've accomplished it. So not only are you more productive, but you also feel a lot more satisfied and contented with, yeah, I kicked butt today. I got everything that I wanted to get done, instead of having a to-do list that, day after day after day, that same thing on the to-do list is still there. Well, then chunk it down. If it's a 5-hour project, then commit to 30 minutes every day. You're working on that 5-hour project until you get it done.
I love that. I'm such a believer in this. And I think, I've just seen it. I've seen the impact that this has on people's lives, the stress. And, I went through this exercise with the sales leader I mentioned. And, Jake, you're like, I'm working 50, 60 hours. And I said, well, okay, help me to understand this. We block, okay, you got partnerships. Okay, well, that's X. How much time do you think you need there? Well, okay, it's this. All right, well, if we block 2 hours every day, a morning slot in this, if somebody wants to meet on partnerships, we just do it during those blocks. I remember when this clicked for me, and I was very fortunate. I worked at a company at the time called Career Builder, and they taught us a lot about this stuff. They taught us these techniques of time blocking, which I wasn't really familiar with. And I'll tell you what I remember. I remember that I watched so many people in sales. I was in a sales leadership role. They're stressed out and they're working. And I found that I would leave the office and be done because everything was my time blocks were set up for me. And it just became very freeing. A lot of people, they'll look at my calendar and they're like, oh my God. They're like, how do you not go crazy? I'm like, are you kidding me? The fact that my calendar is so blocked and looks like this is so freeing. It's like, I don't need to worry about, when was I going to follow up with that thing? I'm like, oh yeah, I put that on my Tuesday block for X activities. And so, anyone out there, we'll link to some of your content to Amanda around the 5 tips, but I really just could not endorse it more around I think sometimes we think discipline is restrictive, but in the case of time management, I really feel like discipline is freeing because it allows you to not have to carry that stuff to that 3 a.m. and you wake up, you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to follow up with Johnny, or this thing happens. I just don't have that as much. It still happens from time to time where I have a wild idea that comes up. So let's talk about the future, right? So you get an opportunity here. And this is one of the questions I asked, most of my guests, which is, as you think about the future, and again, you're in this kind of marketing, sales, messaging, leadership world, the work that you all do crosses a lot of different categories. Time management, we talked about that. What are one or two of the other top trends that you see? What are some of the other things that you feel like your clients are coming to you more and more with, or areas that you feel like more and more organizations need to be thinking about right now?
So, when my father first came out with the book, so 15 years ago, the average company was on 7 different marketing mediums trying to get the attention of a buyer. Today, we're on, right? Why are you laughing? Why does that make you laugh?
Oh my God, 7 sounds amazing. That's I'm
what
waiting for the punchline of how many it is now.
Yes, you already know. So it's 13 on average with 5 social media platforms and 3 paid advertising sites. So we're doing double the amount of work to grab the attention. Why? Because my father used to talk about, the clutter factor is getting so insane. Your prospect is seeing 40,000 commercial messages a day. Those commercial messages were happening from the elite of businesses, right? Today, any mom, woman, child can pop up a Facebook page and start marketing on it. That's why in the last 4 years, we went from 3 million marketers on Facebook alone to 10 million. And on top of it, we have 3.8 billion social media pages. So we are inundated with information. So more than ever before, we have to break through that clutter by 1, getting hyper focused on who's the most important person. I gave you that checklist already. Who's your dream 100, right? Dream 5, dream 15, whatever works for your business. And then number 2, what is the message you are giving to clearly pierce through that veil to get straight to their doorstep so they open it up and they welcome you in with open arms?
Okay, I love that. So talk about how do you feel like, because again, I think for a lot of marketing organizations now, and I'll just tell you kind of what I see, is one, there's an obsession, and I think it came from, again, there weren't as many channels, so many of the calls to action or the education, the social media, wasn't all about click to buy, right? It was about education. And now I think what's happening, I think that's actually happening more now. You're seeing really important channels where you might not be able to track, people call it dark social or other things. How do you see marketing organizations evolving in this world where there's a lot of this activity on an organic social post where, someone might not click something, but you're giving value, right? I see a lot of like marketing going the route of like, we're giving value and, or we're in communities, right? Where, especially in the B2B world, right? We're in communities where with other peers, and I can't track that as a marketer, right? I can't track that so-and-so gave us an endorsement necessarily unless somebody tells me about it later. So how do you feel like marketing is evolving to, I guess, like meet buyers where they're at, or try to be in these various channels where maybe you can't track it as much as you used to? I mean, and again, I don't know if that's something that you talk to customers or clients about, but I feel like that's one of the big things I see in marketing is that they're really struggling with this idea of like, I need to be doing more things that I may not be able to directly track, but I do know that this is where my Dream 100 lives. I know that they're in this channel, or they're in these channels. And so I know we need to be active, like community management. How do you kind of marry those things around the trackable versus the untrackable?
So I was just on another podcast, Tyler Jorgensen, and he told me that it used to take 7 different commercial messages for somebody to remember your brand. And today it's on average 500 impressions before they recognize your brand. So, and then even just like if somebody's looking on your website, on average, they look at 5 pieces of content before they raise your hand to talk to a salesperson. That one feels a little bit better. At least they're on your website, so there's an intent there. But
and you can maybe track a little bit of that too.
Yeah. But I agree, it is hard. I will say, I think that this is really valuable for people to hear. And it's truly the difference between working smarter rather than just treating it like a tactic and just nailing over and over and over again. So let's say that you were in a stadium full of your prospects, or you're posting on your LinkedIn page, or you're making 100 dials. If you were to give the title of here's what I'm going to talk to you about, what would you say? Because we look at, like, let's say LinkedIn, right? These people write these messages of, hey, I'd love to talk to you about my service and how great it is and why we should do business together, right?
And it's all lead generation or web development. Those are like the classics. It's like, could you deal with 6 to 8 more contracts this week? I'm like, well, yes, I actually could. Thank you. And they're like, oh, well, your web development firm is better. But that's exactly what I see. It's just,
it's painful. You know what it is? They're speaking to, so what we call it the buyer's pyramid. My father invented this. So at any given time, whether you're at a trade show and you're speaking to them, you're posting on a social media page, you're doing ads, you're doing billboards, you're doing cold calls. At any given time, 3% of that marketplace is interested in buying now. 3%. Another 7% are open to it. The next 30% aren't thinking about your product. The next 30% think that they're not interested, and the last 30% are definitely not interested. So 90% of the people that you are reaching out to don't care about you and what you do. So if you are only talking about you and what you provide, you are only reaching 3%, and that is what all your competitors are fighting for, that 3%. So what we recommend is to lead with educations that take them from the I'm not interested, or I think I have an opinion about what you do, and educate them into the buying now category. So when you say it's all over the web, how do we track it? Well, at least let's make sure that we follow a system for how to create content, because 40% of content online actually hinders the sale. Can you freaking believe that?
Yeah, tell me about that. What are the types of content? I can definitely believe it, because again, it's the things I see. It's like, check out our latest blog post on this topic. Click a link away from a social media to go view it. And it's like, who does that? Like who's reading like 14-page ebooks right now? Like, ooh, let me cuddle up with a warm cup of coffee and this sweet, sultry marketing automation ebook here. So yes, I definitely believe it.
Probably paid for by an outsourced VA.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we actually have a framework for how to create a message. So I hadn't revealed this until recently. It's been our secret sauce to how we've helped more companies become number one than anybody else. Following this system for how to lead your prospects to you is the only logical conclusion, where price is no objection anymore, because you've given so much value that you're the only option. Do you want to actually know the framework?
Oh my gosh, I want to know it, Amanda.
Okay, so imagine the buyer's pyramid that I talked about with my fathers. I took his buyer's pyramid and I flipped it upside down so it looked like a funnel. And those same divides of the 30% and 30% and then 3%. So that top piece, it's critical to talk about global trends. What is going on in the marketplace that will grab the attention of everyone in that buyer's pyramid? What's been going on over time? What are you seeing as the future, right? If a sales rep walks in and says, hey, I'd like to sell you my product versus what we're seeing as trends that are facing you. These are the three biggest trends threatening your either extinction or growth, hyper growth in the next 6 months. And I will give you a report of that or an education on that or see this post about one of those three trends. Wow, how interesting, right? So we just want to grab them, and sadly, pain usually is much stronger. People take action on pain faster than they do going to pleasure. So something that really just sometimes my clients call it a punch in the face.
Yeah,
so
that's okay. It's better like pain funnel is the other, it's like, what if this happened and this happened and this happened? And you're like, things would suck. Like,
Okay, so global trends. Then we get into targeted pains. Like, what is keeping your prospect up at night specifically? Because a lot of the times when I do this with sales reps, they go, well, obviously it has to do with the pain point of my product.
Yeah, of course. It's that they don't have enough automated triggers to be able to do XYZ. Like, that's their number one priority for a CMO right now.
Exactly. So it is the job and responsibility of everyone in an organization, whether it's the appointment setter or the sales rep or the CMO or CRO or the CEO, to all be on the same page of what are all the things keeping that prospect up at night? Because we need to understand, if we understand their pain better than they do, they believe that we have the solution. So from the targeted pain, then we get into the solutions portion. And all we have to do is solve pieces of their pain. Like you giving that great thing about say no to appointments this week. Like that's just a great solution that just a drop of, wow, that's wisdom. Wow, I haven't even given my credit card yet. And he's giving me something. Wow, I really trust this person, right? Above and beyond what other people have done. Then from solutions into resetting of the buying criteria. This is the difference between content marketing and what my father taught, education-based marketing and selling. So if all you do is educate the first pieces, you could just educate your way right into sending them to your competitor. So everything that you could say something like, here are the 5 things to consider before hiring or buying a product or service like mine. And everything that you're educating them on should be everything that you do that is different from your prospect or different from your competition. So instead of me saying, hey, I'm the best when looking to double your sales, you want to look for me because I do blah, 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 blah. Instead, I'd say, if you want to double your sales and you want to work with somebody, the first thing you should ask is, have they generated over $100 million? Because 0.004% of businesses make it to over 100 million, and you have to make sure. Number 2, you want to, right? Like if I'm educating them
I love
and
that.
then I say, hey, these are all the things that are about me, they go, duh, I haven't even mentioned my product or service.
Exactly.
And they are like salivating, like I couldn't do anything else other than work with you. So and then it leads to you as the logical conclusion. That is my framework.
I love that framework. Yeah, we call this kind of like the idea of like worldview alignment, which is, you're talking about industry. It's so interesting how this fits like right in this. It's like these kind of common industry trends. Then you talk about like larger, but there's this one trend that's coming, and it means that this is happening. This happened. We use a lot of third party stats too, when possible.
Yes.
But like, look, this is our thoughts on trends. This is what this company's saying, or that company, Harvard Business Review or whatever. And then you go into those again. So like, in order to compete in this new world, you have to be able to do this, and that. And that's that differentiation. And it's so interesting, that's exactly what you've seen work as well too. It just, that's how business people speak. They don't speak in terms of a product, right? Like, we do a lot of fractional sales leadership work, for example. And they're like, well, do I want a fractional sales leadership, or am I trying to hit my number as, in a world where I'm not certain in terms of like what I'm going to be able to do from a hiring standpoint? Am I want to try to triple revenue because I want to do, XYZ, type of, new outbound activities or something like that. And so I think it's just such a really simple framework for people. And again, we'll find a link to this as well too. So
they can get it for free in chapter 4 of the Ultimate Sales Machine. That's for free.
All right.
Or break the bank and spend $18 and get
the $18. Obviously, we're going to link to it, so don't worry about that. We'll link to it, we'll make sure people check it out, your version as well too. So as we start to wrap up here, we talked a little bit about these trends and the things that are top of mind for you. What's the one thing we haven't talked about? Like, is there something that, again, you think about when you're having these conversations with CEOs, and maybe especially as we look at, this is, a more uncertain time. What I was talking to somebody else about, a podcast guest, is, in previous, we've had these kind of events, right? The financial meltdown, the pandemic, were these events that kind of sent us into this, difficult economy. And it's really been a slow burn, over the last, with, from the war to inflation. It's just kind of like, there hasn't been that one thing. And so I think a lot of people are just really uncertain, like, okay, are we there yet? Are we at the bottom? Like, et cetera. And so when you're talking to leaders today, what's maybe the one, thing that you want to leave leaders with, in terms of, as they're thinking about these times, not sure about, should we be thinking about growth, stability,
Yes.
profit? What are some of the conversations you're having right now?
So I actually think for times like these, we should go back to the foundational fundamentals so that we are just ironclad, bulletproof within the organization. So, like we talked about time management. If this year, if all you did was focus on you and your team increasing their productivity by 40%, right? 50%, what would that do? And that doesn't cost a dime. It's just being about meticulous about watching what you're doing. Another core competencies of ours is a thing called workshopping. And why wouldn't we, in times of duress, as we go to a gym to strengthen our muscles, why wouldn't we strengthen the muscle of problem solving and be able to utilize an entire organization to collaboratively come up with solutions? So we have a thing called the 52-week workshopping playbook, where it's prompts and how to lead a workshop so that everyone, it takes the heat off of the CEO to come up with every solution. It then assists for all of the other staff to give their input and be a part of the solution. Therefore, they feel more heard, they feel understood, they feel collaborative, and then they also feel responsible to be a part of the solution because they've been a part of the process. That's to right. Identify the pain and then find the solution. So we call it workshopping. It's chapter 2 and 3 in Ultimate Sales Machine. But I'm really going back to the basics, because if your organization can handle solving problems, and if every week, if you spent 1 hour a week working on the different impact areas of your business to improve those processes operationally, right? Like, what's one way that you can generate more referrals? Let's do a workshop on it. Let's do a workshop on what's the biggest thing holding us back from growing sales right now, and get everyone to, there's a process and a system for how we do this to get that feedback. How to close sales faster, better, smarter. What could we do there, right? And getting everyone involved so that when the hard times come, we're already ready, because we've been working that muscle once a week for the last 6 months, 8 months. We'll know how to pivot, we'll know how to shift, and we'll know how to involve everybody in that process to get through it.
I love that. And I'll add to that, I think for a lot of organizations, I always there's not really such a thing as bottlenecks, right? There can only be one bottleneck technically. And I think for a lot of organizations, when you think maybe a great workshop is, what is the number one blocker? And I think a lot of times, again, as the CEO, it's like, oh, and for me, right? It's like, oh, I've got this idea, right? And so then like that becomes the thing that we workshop. And I found that, asking the team, they're like, that is important, but it's actually this thing. And you're like, well, okay, well, let's figure that out. But I love that. The more that you include the team, it's just like my best analogy is if you ever go to a bar or somewhere and you play trivia, the team of 3 almost never wins, even if they're the smartest 3 people versus the team of like 10, because there's just such a collective of different knowledge bases of, 80s music and fine arts and geography that, 3 brains are difficult to match. And so this idea of bringing your team in right now to help to workshop, understand where the challenges are, and then, like you said, it makes them feel bought in to be a part of the solution, I think is, some amazing advice for people right now. So Amanda, I could keep talking about this for a long time. I love this. I love talking about the future of like where we're headed, and also talking about how getting back to basics is important. So I really appreciate you joining the show.
Thank you. I've had such a blast. You gave me so many great nuggets too. Thank you for that.
I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you again. And everyone, again, we'll link to a lot of this in the show notes. And we will see you next week on the Jake Dunlap Show. Thank you, everyone, again, for listening to another episode. If you are listening all the way to the end, I hope you have left a review. I hope that you make sure that you're following or subscribing on your favorite podcast listening apparatus. We'll be back next Thursday. And again, make sure to check out the Monday episodes as well, too. A lot of people are really enjoying these kind of mini episode Mondays. So make sure to tune in, subscribe, and leave a review.